then they also have jurisdiction.
Now let's go to the state level. On the state level, I guess there's a couple of different agencies that might be involved. And of course, the giant is the DEP. Tell us about that.
NJDEP has control over a vast array of issues in New Jersey. Water is probably one of the larger, and when I say water, it's the broad definition of water. They are in the process of controlling what kind of drinking water you can use, whether you're allowed to tie into a municipal system or whether you need to drill a well. They also deal with what happens to the rainwater and stormwater that's generated by your project. Water hits the roof of your house, it doesn't get soaked into the ground, it flows somewhere, and they will control that. They also control where the septic effluent comes from your house, restaurant, business, and whether it goes into an individual septic disposal system on your property or whether it ties in the municipal system. The DEP also has a whole separate unit that deals with wetlands. Wetlands are a hot topic in New Jersey and have been for a number of years now.
In a nutshell, what's the deal with wetlands?
Wetlands it's land that, after an analysis of a series of factors, including whether the soils are regularly inundated with water and plant species that may live there, are determined to be wetlands, which means, from the scientific parlance, that they help recharge groundwater into the ground and help purify the water. The DEP has a series of regulations that control what you can and cannot do in wetlands, and also in areas surrounding wetlands, which are known as buffers. So New Jersey has a fabric of regulation that governs both whether a property is subject to wetlands regulation, and even if there's none on your property, if your neighbor happens to have some and you're within the buffer zone, that buffer extends across property ownership lines. So you can be impacted by something up to 300 feet away that you really don't think it's going to it's going to prohibit from you from doing something, but you may well need to confront that issue.
All right, so there's a delineated wetland near your property line, and you want to build, and there's zoning laws in your town that says you can only build so close to your border line, but these buffers on the wetlands extend
across the property line,
across the whole property.
Right.
How generally speaking, how wide is that buffer?
It depends on what's known as the resource value of the wetlands, and that can be from anywhere, in certain circumstances, to zero. In other words, you could build right up to the wetlands, and in some cases, up to 300 feet away. So if you were filing a simple application to build a deck on your house, one of the things that the municipality that you live in would ask you on your application to the local board is, are there any wetlands on or adjacent to your property? And so you would need to go through that analysis, even if you just wanted to build another addition on your house. And that involves potentially the retaining of experts that deal with wetlands and other sophisticated analysis. There are maps available, some promulgated by DEP and some by the towns, that attempt to map certain wetlands in New Jersey, but at the end of the day, for a definitive ruling, you need to have a wetland scientist evaluate your property, then you actually make a submission to NJDEP. It's called a request for letter of interpretation, and you make your submission, and DEP often actually comes out to the property, looks and checks and see, their field representatives check and see if there are wetlands, and if so, the degree of the buffer that would be associated with it.
Now, that's generally the Department of the Environmental Protection Agency. Are there any other state agencies that you deal with on occasion?
Often.
Transportation? Or,
NJDOT is the Department of Transportation. NJDOT controls access points and volumes of traffic on state roads and interstate highways. And there are a surprising number of state roads that you really don't think of them as a state highway. They just happen to be a state road. That is a whole separate application process, a whole separate fee structure. And there are a group of engineers who specialize in traffic, and they do everything from performing an analysis of the safety of the functioning of the driveways, for example, and the sufficiency of parking, loading, and unloading on a site, and the ability to access a property, turn in and turn out, can you make lefts going out, that kind of thing. DEP or DOT is, I was going to say not as rigorous as DEP, but on certain circumstances, there is a long time frame which you may have to wait for the analysis to come through. DEP on wetlands is now running 7 months to 10 months for a request on whether there's wetlands. DOT, depending on what type of permit you're seeking, can be a pretty substantial length of time also to wait.
I think that pretty much exhausts the
Well,
groups, or are there others out there
There are others that have
lurking out there,
lurking and
waiting to
and
jump on you for building?
they've reared their ugly head fairly recently in the land use field. New Jersey Supreme Court decades ago now decided that the addition of affordable housing in every municipality in New Jersey was something that was salutary and constitutionally required. And in reaction to those Supreme Court decisions, the law has evolved regularly and rapidly with reference to affordable housing. The latest version of the governmental entity on that issue is COA, the Council on Affordable Housing. And COA has demanded of every municipality in the state of New Jersey a housing element plan, whereby the municipality tells the state of New Jersey how many affordable housing units they're going to try to create. The units can be created by building new, you can renovate existing houses. And what that's done to zoning recently is the state has decided that, at least in the Highlands, which is a substantial part of northern New Jersey, thou shalt not build anything until COA has determined whether or not you're using up a scarce resource in doing so. So if you have a piece of property that might be suitable for affordable housing, you can't put your hardware store on it until you get the state's permission that you're not using up a resource that might be better suited for affordable housing.
Now, you mentioned the Highlands Act. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
It's a big item in the state.
It's a very significant item, and it's again a perfect example of the clash that occurs between individual freedom and property rights, and the government's desire to ensure quality of life for everyone without the state. The concept behind the Highlands is that the Highlands region, which is basically the northwestern quadrant of New Jersey, is the area that produces drinking water for a substantial part of the state further east and further south, some of the big cities and metropolitan areas. And the state has decided that to prevent the further degradation of the water quality and water coming from that part of the state, that they're going to regulate building in a very severe way in the Highlands. So what we've seen in parts of Sussex, Warren, Somerset, and Hunterdon counties, even parts of Morris County, is an absolute prohibition, basically, on